Growing up, Vanessa always had a gift for diminishing my achievements and amplifying my failures. When I was 11, she convinced our parents that my science fair project should be supervised by her because I wasn't detail-oriented enough. She ended up with the blue ribbon. At 15, she explained to our extended family that my acceptance to the prestigious summer coding camp was just affirmative action for girls in tech, rather than actual talent. By 20, I'd learned to celebrate my victories in private, away from my older sister's poisonous commentary. But how do you hide a company valued at $300 million? I'm Olivia Chen, 32 now, but this story begins 4 years ago when I was just another hopeless dreamer in a San Francisco apartment with more student loans than furniture. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My sister Vanessa, 5 years older and infinitely more practical, had already established herself as the golden child. Stanford MBA, executive position at a Fortune 500 tech company, perfect husband from the right family, and a home in the most exclusive neighborhood in the Bay Area. Every family gathering was essentially a shrine to Vanessa's accomplishments, with me cast perpetually as the cautionary tale. Not everyone can be Vanessa, my mother would sigh whenever I shared my own aspirations. The statement wasn't meant to be cruel, just a recognition of what the family had collectively decided was reality. Vanessa was exceptional. I was, well, ordinary at best, disappointing at worst. It wasn't always this way. As children, we'd been close despite our differences. Vanessa was methodical and calculating where I was intuitive and creative. She played it safe while I took risks. She followed rules. I questioned them. These differences only became problematic when our parents began treating them as a hierarchy, with Vanessa's approach invariably superior to mine. I still remember the exact moment when different became lesser in our family's eyes. I was 16, sitting at our dining room table, enthusiastically sharing my idea for a peer-to-peer tutoring platform I wanted to build for my high school. "It's not exactly revolutionary," Vanessa interrupted, not looking up from her graduate school application. "Those kinds of platforms already exist." "Not like this," I persisted. "This one would match students based on learning styles and strengths, not just subjects. Someone who's visual could be paired with another visual learner who excels in that subject." My father frowned, looking to Vanessa. "Is there actually a market for something like that?" That was the moment, the exact second when my father's instinct became to verify my ideas with Vanessa rather than consider them on their own merits. Vanessa, never one to miss an opportunity to establish intellectual dominance, shook her head. "The ROI would be minimal. Schools don't have budget for specialized software, especially not something developed by a high school student. You should focus on your AP classes instead, Liv. Your math grades are slipping." And just like that, my idea was dismissed. Not because it lacked merit, but because I was the one proposing it. This pattern repeated throughout my teens and 20s, Vanessa positioning herself as the voice of reason against my impractical ideas. The family accepted this dynamic without question, and over time, so did I. By 28, I had learned to keep my professional ambitions to myself. I had a decent job as a UX designer at a mid-sized tech company, an apartment I shared with 2 roommates, and a small circle of friends who actually believed in me. On paper, I was doing fine, certainly not failing by normal standards. But in the context of my family, where Vanessa's achievements were the only measuring stick that mattered, I might as well have been unemployed. The idea that would change everything came during a seemingly ordinary week. I'd been working on a project for a client in the healthcare sector, designing interfaces for patient data management. The work was technically interesting, but fundamentally frustrating. Every solution we designed was constrained by outdated systems, regulatory hurdles, and fragmented data. Patients couldn't access their own medical histories without jumping through endless hoops. Doctors couldn't easily share critical information across institutions. The entire healthcare data ecosystem seemed designed to prevent rather than facilitate care. One night, after a particularly maddening feedback session where a promising interface was rejected due to legacy system limitations, I found myself sketching at my kitchen table well past midnight. What if patients owned their data instead of institutions? What if medical information wasn't siloed in thousands of incompatible databases, but secured through blockchain technology and accessible through a single patient-controlled platform? By morning, I had filled an entire notebook with concepts. By the end of the week, I had a crude prototype and a name, MedLink. The core innovation wasn't just technical, it was a fundamental rethinking of how healthcare data could be structured around patients rather than providers or insurers. Patients would control comprehensive medical profiles, granting temporary access to providers as needed. Doctors would have complete, up-to-date histories without redundant tests or paperwork. The potential for improving care while reducing costs was enormous. I spent the next 3 months refining the concept, working evenings and weekends while maintaining my day job. I consulted with a friend who specialized in healthcare regulation and another who worked in blockchain security. Together, we addressed the obvious challenges: HIPAA compliance, data security, interoperability with existing systems. The more we worked, the more confident I became that MedLink could actually transform healthcare data management. This isn't just good, Olivia. This could be revolutionary, said Marcus, my blockchain expert friend, after reviewing the technical specifications. The timing is perfect too. Healthcare interoperability is a massive priority right now, and your approach solves problems that much bigger companies are struggling with. For the first time in my adult life, I allowed myself to believe that I might have created something truly valuable. The prototype was functional, the business model was solid, and early feedback from medical professionals in my network was overwhelmingly positive. I began preparing to seek seed funding, crafting pitch decks and financial projections with meticulous care. I even applied to a prestigious healthcare technology accelerator program, though I tried to keep my expectations realistic about my chances. Then came the email that changed everything. "Congratulations," it began. "We are pleased to inform you that MedLink has been selected for the Health Tech Accelerator Spring cohort." I read the message 14 times, certain there must be some mistake. The accelerator accepted less than 2% of applicants, typically founders with extensive industry experience or advanced technical degrees, not UX designers with a side project. But there was my name, right alongside the invitation to 3 months of intensive mentorship and a $150,000 investment in exchange for a small equity stake. This was real. This was happening. MedLink had potential, and now I had the opportunity to realize it. I would need to quit my job, commit full-time to the startup, and put everything I had into making it succeed. The risk was enormous, but for once in my life, I didn't second-guess myself. I accepted the accelerator's offer the same day. There was only one thing left to do before I gave notice at work: tell my family. Despite years of dismissal and diminishment, some childish part of me still craved their approval, or at least their acknowledgement that I was doing something significant. Perhaps this objective validation from the accelerator would finally prove to them that my ideas weren't just naive fantasies. That weekend, I drove to my parents' home in Marin County. For our monthly family dinner, Vanessa and her husband would be there as always, providing the standard recitation of their recent triumphs. This time, though, I would have something meaningful to contribute. Maybe, just maybe, they would see me differently. The dinner began, as they always did. My mother spent the first 20 minutes updating us on various relatives and neighbors while my father nodded along, occasionally interjecting with a comment about his golf game. Then, inevitably, the spotlight turned to Vanessa. "We've had an incredible month," she announced, cutting into her perfectly cooked salmon. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. The acquisition I've been working on finally closed. $400 million deal, largest in the company's history. The CEO personally thanked me at the board meeting. My father beamed with pride. That's fantastic, sweetheart. I always knew you'd be the one closing big deals someday. And, Vanessa continued, her smile widening, we've put an offer on a vacation property in Napa. Just a small vineyard, nothing extravagant, but perfect for weekends away from the city. A vineyard, my mother exclaimed. How wonderful. We'll have to come visit once you're settled. I sat quietly, pushing food around my plate, waiting for an opening. It came sooner than expected when my father, perhaps noticing my silence, turned to me with his standard inquiry. And how are things with you, Olivia? Still at that design job? This was it. My moment. I took a deep breath and tried to keep my voice steady. Actually, I have some news. I've developed a healthcare technology platform that was just accepted into the Health Tech Accelerator program. I'll be leaving my job to work on it full-time. They're investing $150,000 for the initial development phase. There was a moment of stunned silence. My father's fork paused halfway to his mouth. My mother looked confused, as though she hadn't quite processed what I'd said. Vanessa was the first to respond. You're quitting your job? She asked, her tone making it clear she thought this was the height of irresponsibility. For what, exactly? I explained Medlink as concisely as I could. The patient-centered approach, the blockchain security, the interoperability solutions. As I spoke, I could see my father's expression shifting from shock to concern, while my mother looked increasingly anxious. Vanessa's face remained impassive, but I noticed a subtle tightening around her eyes. Let me get this straight, she said, when I finished. You've created a prototype with no medical background, no technical degree, and no industry connections, and now you're going to try to revolutionize healthcare data? One of the most regulated, complex sectors in the entire economy? The accelerator believes in the concept, I replied, trying to keep the defensiveness out of my voice. They only accept... Accelerators take flyers on long-shot ideas all the time, Vanessa interrupted. It's a portfolio approach. They invest in 20 startups knowing 19 will fail. No offense, Liv, but you're clearly one of the 19. That's not fair, I protested, feeling the familiar sting of her dismissal. You haven't even seen the platform. I don't need to, she said with a dismissive wave. Healthcare IT is dominated by billion-dollar companies with thousands of engineers and decades of experience. What makes you think you can compete with that? My father cleared his throat uncomfortably. Olivia, honey, Vanessa has a point. This sounds very ambitious. Maybe you should keep your job and work on this as a side project until it's more established. The accelerator requires full-time commitment, I explained. And I believe in Medlink. The prototype is already functional, and the feedback from medical professionals has been incredibly positive. Oh, Olivia, my mother sighed, exchanging a look with my father that I recognized all too well, concern mixed with resignation. We just don't want to see you struggle unnecessarily. There's no shame in having a steady job rather than chasing these startup dreams. I'm not just chasing dreams, I insisted, frustration building. I've been accepted into one of the top healthcare accelerators in the country. That's external validation that this idea has merit. Or it's a $150,000 mistake that you'll be trying to recover from for years, Vanessa countered smoothly. Remember your tutoring platform idea in high school? Or that social networking app for artists in college? Or the freelancer management tool you talked about 2 years ago? You get excited about new ideas, Liv, but you don't have the business acumen or technical expertise to execute them successfully. Each example was like a precision strike, reminding everyone at the table of my previous enthusiasms that had never materialized into anything substantial. The fact that none of those projects had received the support, financial or otherwise, that might have helped them succeed, went unmentioned. My father sighed heavily. "We just worry about you, that's all. Not everyone is cut out for the entrepreneurial path. There's nothing wrong with that. Not everyone can be Vanessa," my mother added, repeating the familiar refrain. I looked around the table at their concerned faces, recognizing the futility of trying to convince them. In their eyes, I was still the impractical dreamer, the family's cautionary tale. Vanessa was watching me with an expression that mixed pity with something else, something that looked almost like concern, though not for my well-being. "Well, I appreciate your feedback," I said finally, forcing a smile. "But I've already accepted the accelerator's offer. I start next month." The remainder of dinner was strained, with conversation carefully steered toward safer topics. As I was leaving, Vanessa pulled me aside by the front door. "Look, Liv, I know you think I'm being harsh, but I'm trying to protect you," she said, her voice lowered. "The startup world is brutal, and healthcare is particularly unforgiving. You're setting yourself up for very public failure." "I appreciate your concern," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "But I'm going to do this regardless." "At least let me look over your business plan," she offered. "I can help you identify the weak points before you present to potential investors. Maybe make some introductions to people in the healthcare space." For a moment, I was tempted. Vanessa did have valuable experience and connections that could benefit MedLink. Perhaps this was her way of extending an olive branch, of finally taking one of my ideas seriously. But something in her expression gave me pause. There was an intensity to her interest that felt less like sisterly support and more like assessment. The same look she'd had years ago when evaluating whether my science fair project was worth taking over. "Thanks, but I've got it covered," I said, stepping back slightly. "The accelerator provides mentorship and connections." "Suit yourself," she shrugged, her expression cooling. "Just don't say I didn't try to help when you're back looking for a job in 6 months." I drove home that night with a strange mix of emotions. On one hand, my family's reaction was exactly what I'd expected. Condescension thinly veiled as concern, with Vanessa leading the charge. On the other hand, something about Vanessa's sudden interest in MedLink left me unsettled. In all our years, as sisters, she had never once offered to help with any of my projects or ideas. Why start now? That night, I made a decision that would prove more important than I could have imagined. I would keep the details of MedLink completely private from my family. No updates on development progress, no discussion of technical breakthroughs, no sharing of investor meetings or business strategies. If they asked, I would offer only vague platitudes about moving forward or making progress. It wasn't that I thought Vanessa would actually steal my idea. Healthcare technology was far removed from her expertise in corporate acquisitions. But her dismissal in front of our parents had once again undermined my confidence at a moment when I needed it most. I couldn't afford that negativity as I embarked on the most challenging project of my life. As I lay in bed that night, scrolling through the accelerator welcome materials, a notification popped up on my phone. It was a social media post from Vanessa, a glamorous photo of her and her husband at a charity gala, captioned, "Another amazing night supporting children's education with the most brilliant and successful minds in the Valley. Blessed Honti giving back." The comments were filled with praise and admiration from friends, colleagues, and family members, including our parents. I put my phone away and turned to the window, looking out at the San Francisco skyline glittering against the night sky. Vanessa could have her carefully curated image and familial adoration. I had something more important now, a chance to build something genuinely meaningful. I had no way of knowing then that in just 4 years, that glittering skyline would include a building with MedLink's logo illuminated at the top. Nor could I have predicted that Vanessa's seemingly innocuous offer of help that night would be the first move in a chain of events that would test not just my business acumen, but the very foundation of our family. But that's all part of what happened next. And to understand how the family failure ended up with her name on the NASDAQ board, you first need to see what occurred in those critical early months when MedLink was just beginning to take shape. The health tech accelerator occupied 3 floors of a renovated warehouse in San Francisco's Soma district. Walking through those doors on my first day felt like stepping into a different universe, one where ideas were currency and innovation was the only hierarchy that mattered. The cohort consisted of 12 startups, each trying to solve different healthcare challenges, AI-powered diagnostic tools, remote monitoring platforms, novel payment systems, and more. Among this group of ambitious founders, many with multiple degrees and previous exits, I initially felt like an imposter. But that feeling faded quickly when we began diving into the work. "Your user-centered approach is what sets MedLink apart," said Elena, our lead mentor, during our first one-on-one session. "Most healthcare solutions are built around providers or payers. Building around patients is both the right ethical choice and, ironically, the path to wider adoption." Those early weeks were transformative. Each day brought new challenges: refining the blockchain architecture, navigating regulatory requirements, building the security protocols that would protect sensitive medical data. I worked 16-hour days and loved every minute. For the first time in my life, my intuitive, creative approach to problem-solving wasn't being dismissed. It was being celebrated. "You have this remarkable ability to see around corners," commented Dr. Levinson, a veteran healthcare executive who served as an advisor to the accelerator. "You're anticipating user needs that even experienced medical professionals haven't articulated yet." 6 weeks into the program, we had a functioning beta version of MedLink that could securely store and share medical records across different systems. Early testing with a small group of volunteer patients and providers yielded enthusiastic feedback. We were making real progress, far exceeding the benchmarks the accelerator had set for us. Then came the mid-program showcase, a private event where the cohort presented their progress to a select group of investors, industry partners, and healthcare experts. It wasn't meant to be a formal pitch event, just an opportunity to gather feedback and begin building relationships with potential funders. Still, I prepared meticulously, rehearsing my presentation until I could deliver it in my sleep. The day before the showcase, I received an unexpected call from Vanessa. "How's the little healthcare project going?" she asked, her tone casually dismissive, as though inquiring about a hobby rather than my full-time professional focus. "It's going well," I replied cautiously, sticking to my resolution to keep details private. "We're making good progress." "That's nice," she said, the brief pause suggesting surprise at even this modest positive update. "Listen, I'm calling because I've been invited to a healthcare innovation event tomorrow evening. Apparently, they're showcasing new startups in the space. Would your thing happen to be part of that?" My stomach tightened. She was describing our mid-program showcase exactly. "Yes, MedLink is presenting," I acknowledged, wondering how she knew about an event that wasn't publicly advertised. "How did you hear about it?" "Oh, you know how it is in the Valley. Everyone knows everyone. One of my colleagues is an angel, investor with an interest in healthcare tech. When I mentioned my sister was working on something in that space, he invited me along. I thought it might be a good opportunity to see what you've been up to." The explanation made sense on the surface, but something felt off. Vanessa had shown nothing but skepticism about MedLink until now. Why the sudden interest? "It's a private event," I said carefully. "I'm not sure they'd allow additional guests." "Already taken care of," she replied smoothly. "My colleague added me as his +1. I'll be there at 7. Looking forward to seeing this project that's pulled you away from a perfectly good career." Before I could object further, she ended the call, leaving me unsettled. I considered contacting the accelerator administrators to Ask about the guest list, but that felt paranoid. Vanessa might be dismissive of my work, but she was still my sister. Perhaps she genuinely wanted to support me in her way. The showcase began at 6 p.m. the following evening. Each startup had a designated area to demonstrate their technology and speak with attendees. The formal presentations would begin at 8, with each founder given 5 minutes to pitch their concept to the entire gathering. I arrived early to set up my station, arranging promotional materials and ensuring the MedLink demo was running perfectly. By 7:30, the venue was filled with investors and industry experts engaging with the various startups. My station had drawn considerable interest, with a continuous stream of visitors asking detailed questions about MedLink's technology and business model. Several investors had already scheduled follow-up meetings. I was in the middle of explaining our patient consent framework to an intrigued hospital administrator when I spotted Vanessa entering with a tall, silver-haired man I didn't recognize. She was dressed immaculately in a designer suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent, projecting the confident aura of someone who belonged in any room she entered. Instead of coming directly to my station, she circulated through the venue, stopping at other startups, nodding attentively as founders explained their concepts. It was nearly 20 minutes before she made her way to my area, by which time I'd almost convinced myself that her presence was benign, perhaps even a sign that she was finally taking my work seriously. "Olivia," she greeted me with an air kiss. Beside each cheek, "This looks professional." The faint praise contained a hint of genuine surprise, as though she'd expected to find me with a science fair poster board and handwritten notes. "This is Richard Kelling," she continued, gesturing to her silver-haired companion. "He's SVP of Strategic Investments at Axelon Healthcare. Richard, this is my sister Olivia." Axelon Healthcare, one of the largest healthcare technology companies in the country. My pulse quickened as I shook his hand. "Fascinating concept you have here," Kelling remarked, gesturing toward the MedLink demo playing on my laptop. "Vanessa was just telling me about your blockchain approach to patient data. Portability. Very innovative." I blinked in surprise. I hadn't shared those technical details with Vanessa. How could she have been discussing them with Kelling? "Thank you," I replied carefully, turning to my sister with a questioning look. I'm surprised Vanessa knew enough about our technical architecture to explain it. "Oh, you know me?" she laughed. Lightly, I pick things up quickly. And Richard and I were just having a general discussion about blockchain applications in healthcare. Your project came up as an example. Before I could probe further, Kelling launched into a series of surprisingly specific questions about MedLink, our approach to HIPAA compliance, our API structure for third-party integration, our token economics for incentivizing data sharing. Each question was technically sophisticated and directly relevant to our core innovation. As I answered, I noticed Vanessa studying the materials on my table with unusual intensity, particularly the one-sheet technical overview we'd prepared for investors. When Kelling stepped away briefly to take a phone call, I confronted her. "How did you know about our blockchain architecture?" I asked directly. "I never shared those details with you." She shrugged dismissively. "It was an educated guess. Blockchain is the obvious solution for this type of data security problem. Any knowledgeable person would have assumed that approach." Her explanation wasn't entirely implausible. Blockchain was indeed becoming more common in healthcare security applications, but it didn't explain the specificity of her conversation with Kelling. Before I could press further, the accelerator director announced that formal presentations would begin in 5 minutes. "I should prepare," I said, gathering my presentation materials. "We can talk after." "Of course," Vanessa smiled. "Break a leg, little sister." The presentations proceeded, in alphabetical order by company name, putting MedLink roughly in the middle of the lineup. I watched the earlier founders deliver their pitches, impressed by the quality of their solutions, but also increasingly confident that MedLink stood out in addressing a fundamental problem that affected nearly every aspect of healthcare delivery. When my turn came, I took a deep breath and stepped onto the small stage. The presentation flowed exactly as I'd rehearsed it. A clear explanation of the problem, our innovative solution, the remarkable early results, and our vision for transformation. The audience was engaged, nodding at key points and visibly impressed by the demo of our working prototype. As I concluded to enthusiastic applause, I caught Vanessa's eye in the audience. She was applauding too, but her expression was calculating, rather than proud. She was looking at me not as a sister, but as, what? A competitor? An opportunity? I couldn't quite define it, but the look sent a chill through me despite the warm reception my pitch had received. After the presentations concluded, the event transitioned to a networking reception. I was immediately surrounded by interested investors and potential partners, exchanging business cards and scheduling meetings. It was nearly an hour before I had a moment to look for Vanessa, only to discover that she and Kelling had already left without saying goodbye. The following weeks were a whirlwind of progress. MedLink's development accelerated, with new features being implemented and security protocols strengthened. We began a small pilot with a community health center in Oakland, integrating our system with their existing patient management software. The results exceeded our most optimistic projections. 94% patient engagement, 78% reduction in administrative errors, and overwhelmingly positive feedback from both patients and providers. On the business side, investor interest was building steadily. 3 venture capital firms had expressed serious interest in leading our seed round, potentially at a valuation much higher than we'd initially anticipated. Everything was proceeding better than I could have hoped, which is why the email that arrived 4 weeks after the showcase felt like a physical blow. "Thought you should see this," wrote Elena, our accelerator mentor, with a link to a press release. The headline made my blood run cold. Axelon Healthcare announces Health Bridge Initiative, revolutionizing patient data ownership through blockchain technology. I read the release with growing horror. HealthBridge was being described as a groundbreaking platform that puts patients in control of their medical data through secure blockchain technology, allowing them to grant and revoke access to their complete medical histories across providers and systems. The description was practically identical to MedLink's core value proposition, and there, quoted extensively in the press release, was Richard Kelling, the same Axelon executive Vanessa had introduced to me at the showcase. HealthBridge represents the future of patient-centered care, Kelling was quoted saying. By reimagining healthcare data as patient-owned rather than institution-owned, we're creating a new paradigm that will improve outcomes while reducing costs across the entire system. My exact words from my presentation, almost verbatim. The final paragraph delivered the knockout punch. The HealthBridge initiative will be led by Vanessa Chen, who joins Axelon Healthcare as Vice President of Strategic Innovation after a distinguished career in corporate development. My sister. My own sister had used the showcase to gather intelligence on MedLink, presented our concept to Axelon as her own idea, and landed a prestigious position leading what was essentially a corporate copy of my startup. With shaking hands, I called Vanessa. She answered on the second ring. "Hello, Olivia," she said coolly, as though she'd been expecting my call. "I suppose. Congratulations are in order for your new position." "Don't play games," she replied, her voice suddenly hard. "This is business, Olivia. You showed an interesting concept, and Axelon saw its potential. That's how innovation works. The best ideas get developed by the organizations with the resources to properly execute them." "You stole my company's entire concept," I said, struggling to keep my voice level. "The blockchain architecture, the patient-centered approach, even the user interface flow, it's all directly from MedLink." "I did nothing of the sort," she countered smoothly. "HealthBridge addresses the same market need, yes, but our technical approach is proprietary to Axelon. Besides, did you really think a startup with no track record could compete with an established player like Axelon? I've saved you years of struggle and inevitable failure. You should be thanking me. Thanking you? I was incredulous. You used our family connection to gain access to my work, then presented it as your own to secure a VP position. How can you possibly justify that? There was a brief silence before Vanessa answered, her voice softer but no less resolute. Look, Liv, I didn't plan this. I went to the showcase out of curiosity, maybe even a little concern for you. But when I saw what you were building, I recognized its potential immediately, and also how far beyond your capabilities the execution would be. Axelon can actually bring this to market. They have the resources, the connections, the regulatory expertise that you simply don't. That's not your decision to make, I insisted. It was my concept, my vision, my work. Ideas are worthless without execution, she replied, reverting to her coolly professional tone. HealthBridge will be in testing at 12 major hospital systems by the end of the quarter. How many can MedLink claim? 1 community clinic? This technology deserves to be developed at scale, and that's exactly what Axelon will do. I hung up, without another word, my mind racing with implications. Vanessa and Axelon had just positioned themselves as direct competitors to MedLink, but with vastly more resources and market access. The venture capital firms that had been courting us would undoubtedly hear about HealthBridge before our funding round closed. Why back a startup when an established player was building the same solution? My phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa. Don't make this personal. It's just business. Just business. The phrase echoed in my head as I sat motionless at my desk, trying to process the magnitude of the betrayal. This wasn't just about competition or even about Vanessa taking credit for my idea. This was an existential threat to MedLink's very survival. I called an emergency meeting with my small team, 2 engineers and a healthcare compliance specialist who had joined during the accelerator program. They were as shocked as I was by the news, but their reaction wasn't what I expected. This validates everything we're doing, said Raj, our lead engineer, his expression fierce rather than defeated. Axelon wouldn't be making this move if they didn't believe the concept has massive potential. But they'll crush us, I argued. They have hundreds of engineers, existing relationships with every major healthcare system, and now they have my sister leading their effort with all our ideas. They have resources, acknowledged Sophie, our compliance specialist. But they don't have our understanding of the patient experience, and they'll be building from scratch while we already have a working platform and real user data. Their refusal to panic gave me a moment to think more clearly. Yes, Axelon was a formidable competitor, and yes, they had essentially stolen our concept. But they were also a massive corporation with the sluggish decision-making and development cycles that entailed. We were small, focused, and already had a functional product that users loved. We need to talk to Elena, I said finally, referring to our accelerator mentor, and probably a lawyer. But first, we need to accelerate our timeline. If Axelon wants to compete with us, they'll need to catch us first. The meeting with Elena the next morning was grim but productive. She had already spoken with the accelerator's legal counsel about potential options. There's a clear ethical breach here, she said, but proving actual theft of intellectual property would be challenging and expensive. Axelon's legal team would drag it out until you ran out of money. Meanwhile, your sister's involvement complicates things further. She could claim you discussed the concept with her before the accelerator, making it a family idea. So we just let them get away with it? I asked, frustration evident in my voice. No, Elena replied firmly. We outmaneuver them. Your sister and Axelon have made a critical mistake. They've announced HealthBridge before they have anything built. That press release was pure vaporware designed to stake a claim in the space and potentially discourage your investors. She leaned forward, her expression determined. But you have a working product, real users, and validation. While they're holding meetings about development roadmaps, you could be expanding your pilot program, gathering invaluable data, and refining your platform based on actual usage. That's your advantage. Use it. Following Elena's advice, we pivoted our strategy entirely. Instead of pursuing a traditional fundraising round, we would expand our pilot program to include 3 more community health centers, focusing on generating irrefutable proof that our approach worked. We would document everything meticulously, creating a public track record that would be difficult for Axelon to claim they had originated. Most importantly, we would accelerate development of our most innovative features, the elements of MedLink, that went beyond basic data portability to include predictive analytics and personalized care recommendations. These were aspects of my original vision that I hadn't emphasized in the showcase presentation, which meant Vanessa and Axelon might not be pursuing them yet. The strategy required stretching our accelerator funding to the absolute limit. We all took minimum salaries, moved to cheaper office space, and focused exclusively on development and pilot expansion. Every day became a race against the invisible clock of Axelon's development timeline. 2 weeks after the Health Bridge announcement, my mother called. I almost didn't answer, assuming she wanted to congratulate me on Vanessa's new position, oblivious to what had actually happened. But something compelled me to pick up. Olivia? Her voice was uncharacteristically hesitant. We saw the announcement. About Vanessa's new job. Something about healthcare technology? Yes, I replied neutrally, waiting to see where this was going. It sounds very similar to what you described at dinner a few months ago. Your MedLink project. I was so shocked by this recognition that I momentarily couldn't respond. My mother had actually made the connection? It is similar, I confirmed cautiously. Very similar, in fact. There was a long pause before she spoke again. Did Vanessa take your idea? The direct question, asked with genuine concern rather than accusation, broke something open inside me. For the first time, I told my mother the full story. The showcase, Vanessa's calculated interest, the introduction to Kelling, and the devastating press release that followed. When I finished, there was silence on the line. I thought perhaps the call had dropped until I heard what sounded like a muffled sob. Mom? I asked, concerned. I'm so sorry, Olivia, she said finally, her voice thick with emotion. I should have seen this coming. Vanessa has always been competitive with you. Competitive? I repeated incredulously. Mom, this goes way beyond competition. She stole my company's core concept and leveraged it for her own career advancement. I know, my mother acknowledged, sounding genuinely distressed. It's inexcusable. I don't know what to do. Your father still doesn't see it. He thinks it's wonderful that Vanessa is mentoring you by developing your concept at a real company. Of course he did. In my father's eyes, Vanessa could do no wrong, even when the wrong was staring him directly in the face. I don't expect you to do anything, I said finally. I just need to focus on building MedLink despite Vanessa's attempt to undermine us. Is there anything we can do to help? She asked tentatively. The question caught me off guard. In all my years of pursuing various projects and ideas, neither of my parents had ever offered to help. Just believe in me, I said after a moment. For once, believe that I might actually succeed at something, even when Vanessa is betting against me. I do believe in you, my mother said softly. More than you know. The call ended shortly after, leaving me with conflicted emotions. My mother's unexpected support was touching, but it did nothing to resolve the immediate crisis facing MedLink. Vanessa had positioned herself and Axelon to potentially destroy everything I'd built before it could truly take flight. That evening, as I worked late in our sparse new office, I received a text message from an unknown number. Kelling has assigned 15 engineers to Health Bridge. Initial prototype targeted for 10 weeks. Looking at same pilot sites you're pursuing. An internal leak from Axelon, though I had no idea who or why. But the information was a stark reminder of what we were up against. And how little time we had to establish ourselves before the corporate giant came hunting for our partners and users. I forwarded the message to my team with a simple addition. We have 9 weeks to make ourselves undeniable. The battle lines were drawn. My own sister had declared war on my company, my dream, and my future. She had the resources, the connections, and our family's unwavering faith in her superiority. All I had was a small team, a working prototype, and the absolute certainty that what we were building could transform healthcare for the better. It wasn't much, but it would have to be enough. Because while Vanessa had built her career on navigating corporate politics and taking credit where due, I had spent my life being underestimated and learning to exceed expectations despite the odds. The race was on, and only one patient-centered healthcare platform would ultimately prevail. My sister was betting it would be hers. I was determined to prove her wrong, not just for my sake, but for every patient who deserved ownership of their health data. What happened next would test not just our technology and business acumen, but the very fabric of my family relationships and my own resilience in ways I never could have anticipated. The 9-week countdown transformed our small team. We operated with the focused intensity of soldiers behind enemy lines, vastly outnumbered but moving with precision while our adversary lumbered forward with brute force. We slept on office couches, ate takeout at our desks, and pushed the boundaries of what 4 people could reasonably accomplish. The beta version of MedLink evolved by the day, with each feature tested immediately by real users at our pilot clinics. 6 weeks in, we had expanded from 1 clinic to 4, with over 3,000 patients, and 47 providers actively using the platform. The data told a compelling story. Administrative errors down 82%, duplicate tests reduced by 64%, patient satisfaction scores at 91%. MedLink was working, not just technically, but in ways that meaningfully improved healthcare delivery. Meanwhile, Vanessa had become a healthcare innovation celebrity. She appeared on industry panels, gave interviews to technology publications, and positioned herself as a visionary who had recognized the transformative potential of patient-centered data architecture. HealthBridge was described in these forums exactly as I had described MedLink at the showcase, sometimes using identical language. "It's infuriating," Sophie muttered one morning, tossing her tablet onto the conference table. The screen displayed Vanessa's latest interview, where she described HealthBridge's novel approach to integrating blockchain security with intuitive patient interfaces. A direct quote from my showcase presentation. How can she just get away with this? Because she has Axelon's PR machine and a compelling personal narrative, I replied, trying to stay focused on our work rather than my simmering anger. The brilliant executive who recognized an opportunity in the healthcare space and is leveraging corporate resources to make it happen. While her sister toils in obscurity, added Raj with a wry smile, building the actual product that works. That was our reality in those weeks, watching Vanessa's public profile rise as the face of healthcare innovation, while we worked frantically to establish MedLink's legitimacy before Axelon could crush us. Each day brought news of HealthBridge's development. Talent acquisitions, partnership announcements, glowing coverage in business press. None of it mentioned actual product benchmarks or user testing, but in the startup world, perception often preceded reality. 7 weeks into our race, I received an unexpected call from Richard Kelling, the Axelon executive who had been Vanessa's companion at the showcase. "Olivia, I hope you don't mind the direct approach," he began without preamble when I answered. "I've been following MedLink's progress with great interest." My guard immediately went up. "Have you? That's surprising given your company's competing initiative." "That's actually why I'm calling," he continued, his tone casual but precise. There's no denying the similarities between our projects. We're essentially duplicating development efforts toward the same goal. A goal that Medlink identified and began building toward long before HealthBridge existed, I pointed out coldly. Origins aside, he continued smoothly, we find ourselves as competitors in a space that would benefit from consolidation rather than fragmentation. I'd like to discuss potential collaboration. Collaboration? I repeated skeptically. What exactly do you mean? Axelon would like to acquire Medlink, he stated plainly. We'd integrate your existing technology with our HealthBridge infrastructure and bring your team on board to ensure continuity. The offer stunned me momentarily. Acquisition had never been part of our planning at this early stage. We were focused on survival, not exit strategy. What about my role in this integration? I asked carefully. We would value your technical contributions, Kelling replied diplomatically. You'd join as a senior product specialist, reporting to the HealthBridge leadership team, reporting to Vanessa. The unspoken implication hung in the air between us. And the financial terms, I pressed, buying time to process what was happening. $2 million for the technology and IP, plus standard employment packages for team members who transition. Given Medlink's pre-revenue status and limited user base, I believe this represents a generous valuation. $2 million. An insultingly low figure for what we'd built, but objectively a significant sum for a company at our stage, especially one facing direct competition from an industry giant. The offer was designed to be just attractive enough to consider, while clearly establishing the power dynamic. Axelon was doing us a favor by absorbing us rather than crushing us. I'll need to discuss this with my team, I said finally. And our advisors. Of course, Kelling replied. But I should mention that this offer has a 72-hour expiration. We're on an aggressive timeline with HealthBridge and need to make decisions quickly about build versus buy components. 3 days to decide whether to surrender everything to Vanessa. The symmetry was almost poetic. My sister had stolen my idea, and now she wanted me to sell her the actual working product so she wouldn't have to build it herself. I called an immediate team meeting to discuss the offer. The responses were mixed. Raj was adamantly against selling, while our other engineers saw the practical benefits of joining Axelon's resources rather than competing against them. Sophie was torn, recognizing both the indignity of the situation and the reality of our challenging position. We need outside perspective, I decided. Let's talk to Elena. Our accelerator mentor listened carefully to the situation, her expression growing increasingly troubled. This is a classic kill or acquihire strategy, she said when I finished. Axelon recognizes that you've built something valuable that could threaten their initiative. They're offering just enough to tempt you, but not nearly what Medlink is actually worth. So we should reject it? I asked. Not necessarily, she cautioned. The offer itself is revealing. It confirms that HealthBridge isn't as far along as their PR suggests. If they had a working product comparable to yours, they wouldn't bother acquiring Medlink. This insight shifted my perspective entirely. The acquisition offer wasn't a threat, it was intelligence. Axelon was behind schedule, and Vanessa was getting desperate. What if we counter with a much higher number? Suggested Raj. 10 million? Minimum. Elena shook her head. They'll walk away. 2 million is already at the upper bound of what they've allocated for this type of tactical acquisition. If you want to sell, counter with 4 and settle at 3. And if we don't want to sell? I asked quietly. She looked at me intently. Then you need to move faster and more boldly than you already are. Use these 72 hours to secure something that makes Medlink too valuable to compete with, but too expensive to acquire. A major partnership, significant funding, or proprietary data that Axelon can't easily replicate. The team looked at me expectantly. This was my decision to make. Not just as the founder, but as the person with the most at stake personally. Selling would mean financial security and the end of this exhausting race. It would also mean surrendering to Vanessa, becoming her subordinate, and watching her take credit for my vision. "We're not selling," I said finally, my resolve hardening. "Vanessa and Axelon want to eliminate us because they're afraid of what we've built. That's not a reason to surrender. It's confirmation that we're on the right path." Elena nodded with approval. "Then you have 72 hours to change the game." "What's your play?" I thought quickly, considering our limited options. We needed something Axelon couldn't easily replicate or purchase. Something that would secure MedLink's position regardless of their resources. "The Veterans Health Network," I said suddenly, the pieces clicking into place. "They've been looking for exactly what we've built. A secure way to integrate their standalone system with private healthcare providers." The Veterans Health Network was one of the largest healthcare systems in the country, serving millions of patients but historically isolated from other medical networks. Their technical team had visited our pilot site the previous month and expressed strong interest in MedLink's interoperability features. "They're notoriously slow to make decisions," Elena cautioned. "You'll never get a formal partnership approved in 72 hours. "We don't need formal approval," I countered. "We need a letter of intent, something public that demonstrates their commitment to exploring implementation of MedLink across their system." I spent the next 24 hours preparing a comprehensive proposal for the Veterans Health Network, highlighting the specific ways MedLink could address their unique challenges. I then leveraged every connection through the accelerator to secure an emergency meeting with their chief technology officer. The meeting itself was a blur of technical specifications, security questions, and integration scenarios. The CTO, a retired naval officer with a no-nonsense approach, pushed me harder than any investor had. After 3 grueling hours, he leaned back in his chair. "We've been looking at this problem for years," he said frankly. "Your solution is the first I've seen that doesn't require us to rebuild our entire infrastructure from scratch." "That's by design," I replied. "MedLink integrates with existing systems rather than replacing them." He nodded thoughtfully. "We need to run this through official channels, but I'm prepared to issue a letter of intent today, confirming our interest in piloting MedLink across 3 of our facilities, with potential for system-wide implementation. Pending results." It was exactly what we needed. A clear signal that MedLink had potential far beyond our current pilot programs. The letter was drafted, approved, and in my hands within hours. When Kelling called for our response to Axelon's offer exactly 72 hours after his initial contact, I was ready. "We've decided to decline," I stated confidently. "MedLink will be continuing as an independent company." "That's unfortunate," he replied, genuine regret in his voice. "I hope you understand that Axelon will be moving forward aggressively with HealthBridge. The competitive landscape may become challenging for a startup in your position." "We understand completely," I said. "In fact, we've just formalized a pilot partnership with the Veterans Health Network that will be announced tomorrow. We'll be implementing MedLink across 3 of their major facilities, with potential for system-wide adoption." The silence on the other end was deafening. "I see," Kelling finally responded, his tone markedly different. "That's a significant development." "We thought so too," I agreed pleasantly. "Please extend my regards to my sister. I'm sure she'll find this information relevant to HealthBridge's strategy." The Veterans Health Network announcement changed everything. Overnight, MedLink transformed from a plucky startup into a serious healthcare technology contender. Industry publications that had been covering Vanessa's HealthBridge announcements now ran features on MedLink's innovative approach and groundbreaking partnership. More importantly, the announcement attracted attention from investors who had been watching the space with interest. Within 2 weeks, we had term sheets from 4 venture capital firms eager to lead our seed round. We ultimately closed $4.5 million at a valuation that made Axelon's acquisition offer look like the insult it was. The capital allowed us to expand the team, accelerate development, and pursue additional partnerships. MedLink began to establish itself not just as a competitor to HealthBridge, but as the leader in patient-centered healthcare data management. Through industry channels, we heard that Vanessa was furious about the Veterans Health Network partnership. Axelon had apparently been pursuing the same relationship, with Vanessa personally leading the outreach. Being beaten to the punch by her failure of a sister had reportedly sent her into a rage at Axelon headquarters. I took no pleasure in that news. The satisfaction of outmaneuvering Vanessa was hollow compared to the damage done to our relationship. We had gone from the complicated but genuine bond of siblings to outright business adversaries. Whatever reconnection had been possible before was now likely destroyed forever. My parents' reaction to the rapidly evolving situation surprised me. My father remained firmly in Vanessa's corner, dismissing Medlink's progress as beginner's luck that would inevitably falter against Axelon's resources. My mother, however, began following Medlink's developments with genuine interest, occasionally texting me articles about our company with encouraging messages. 3 months after declining Axelon's acquisition offer, I received an invitation to speak at the National Healthcare Innovation Summit, the same event where Vanessa had been announced as a keynote speaker weeks earlier. The organizers wanted us to participate in separate sessions, presenting our distinct approaches to healthcare data management. I accepted immediately, recognizing the opportunity to establish Medlink's legitimacy on an important industry stage. The summit would be my first public appearance alongside Vanessa since the HealthBridge announcement, and I was determined to demonstrate that Medlink wasn't just surviving her betrayal, it was thriving because of it. The morning of the summit, I arrived early to prepare for my afternoon session. The venue was filled with healthcare executives, technology vendors, and media representatives. I had just finished my technical check when I spotted Vanessa entering with an entourage of Axelon staff. She was dressed impeccably as always, projecting the confident image of corporate success. Our eyes met across the room, and for a moment, I glimpsed something unexpected in her expression. Not anger or competition, but something almost like regret. It vanished quickly, replaced by her usual mask of professional detachment. She nodded slightly in acknowledgement, before turning away to confer with her team. That brief exchange affected me more than I expected. Despite everything, part of me still remembered the sister who had taught me to ride a bike and helped me with science homework. The pain of her betrayal was so acute precisely because it had come from someone whose approval I had spent a lifetime seeking. I refocused on my presentation, channeling that complex emotion into renewed determination. Today wasn't about Vanessa or our fractured relationship. It was about Medlink and the patients who deserved better healthcare through improved data access and security. My session was scheduled immediately after lunch. As I waited backstage, I overheard fragments of conversation from attendees discussing Vanessa's morning keynote. Phrases like impressive vision and compelling roadmap suggested she had made a strong impression, as expected. When my turn came, I walked onto the IEI stage with the quiet confidence of someone who had nothing to prove but much to share. My presentation focused entirely on Medlink's demonstrated results. The quantified improvements in patient outcomes, the remarkable user adoption rates, the technical innovations that made our interoperability possible. Unlike Vanessa's conceptual overview of what HealthBridge might eventually achieve, I showed what Medlink was already doing, complete with testimonials from doctors and patients at our implementation sites. I concluded not with grandiose promises, but with our simple mission: giving patients control of their health data to improve care coordination and outcomes. The response was overwhelming. The audience, comprised of healthcare professionals who dealt daily with the frustrations of fragmented data systems, immediately grasped the practical value of what we'd built. The Q&A session extended well beyond its scheduled time, with attendees asking detailed technical and implementation questions that demonstrated genuine interest. Afterward, I was surrounded by potential partners and customers eager to learn more about Medlink's capabilities. From the corner of my eye, I noticed Vanessa observing this reception from the back of the room, her expression unreadable. That evening, the summit hosted a networking reception where I found myself in conversations with healthcare executives who had previously met with Vanessa about HealthBridge. Their questions revealed a significant insight. HealthBridge's development was indeed behind schedule, with technical challenges that Axelon's engineers were struggling to resolve. The very problems that MedLink had already solved through months of intensive work and real-world testing. As the reception was winding down, I stepped onto the venue's balcony for a moment of quiet reflection. The day had exceeded my expectations, positioning MedLink as a serious player in the healthcare technology space, despite Axelon's looming presence. "Impressive presentation," came Vanessa's voice from behind me. "Very tactile. Lots of concrete examples." I turned to find her standing in the doorway, wine glass in hand, regarding me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. "That's what happens when you have an actual working product," I replied evenly. "You can show results instead of just talking about potential." She smiled thinly and stepped forward to join me at the balcony railing. "You know, when I first saw your concept at the showcase, I genuinely thought I was doing you a favor," she said after a moment, "bringing the idea to Axelon where it could be properly resourced and scaled. Is that how you justify it to yourself?" I asked, genuinely curious rather than accusatory. "That you were helping me by stealing my company's foundation?" She sighed, looking out at the city lights. "I didn't see it as stealing. I saw it as salvaging a good idea that was likely to fail in inexperienced hands." "My inexperienced hands," I clarified. "Yes," she admitted without apology. "Your track record didn't suggest you could successfully execute something this complex. I made a calculation." "A miscalculation," I corrected quietly. Vanessa turned to me, her expression hardening slightly. "The game isn't over, Olivia. HealthBridge has Axelon's full resources behind it. We've had some development challenges, yes, but we'll overcome them. And when we launch, your little startup will be facing a competitor with unlimited marketing budget and established relationships with every major healthcare system in the country." I recognized the threat for what it was, not just a business strategy, but Vanessa's attempt to reassert the hierarchy that had defined our relationship since childhood. She was the successful one. I was the inevitable failure. The corporate giant would crush the upstart, restoring the natural order. "You know what the difference is between us, Vanessa?" I said finally. "You see this as a competition between two companies, one that the bigger player will inevitably win. I see it as a mission to solve a real problem for patients and providers. That's why MedLink works while HealthBridge struggles. Our code isn't just technically superior, it's built with genuine purpose." She stared at me for a long moment, something shifting behind her eyes. Without another word, she set down her glass and walked back into the reception, leaving me alone with the night air and the growing certainty that MedLink's path forward would be defined not by Vanessa's actions, but by our own vision and execution. Hadn't sought this conflict with my sister or the corporate giant she represented, but standing there on that balcony, I made a decision that would shape everything that followed. I would build MedLink not in reaction to Vanessa's betrayal, but in service to the patients and providers who deserved better healthcare technology. Real work was just beginning, and the challenges ahead would test not just our technology, but my own capacity for resilience and innovation. Vanessa had initiated this battle by stealing my concept, but I would end it by building something even she couldn't dismiss or diminish. A company so undeniably valuable that even my harshest critic would have to acknowledge its success. The family failure was about to rewrite her story, one line of code at a time. The Veterans Health Network partnership became our springboard. Within 6 months, MedLink expanded from 4 pilot sites to 23 active implementations across 3 states. Our user base grew to over 57,000 patients and 1-200 healthcare providers. The data flowing through our platform generated insights that allowed us to refine our algorithms and enhance the user experience in ways our competitors couldn't match. Meanwhile, HealthBridge missed its first 2 announced launch dates. Industry insiders whispered about technical challenges and internal conflicts at Axelon. The company maintained its aggressive marketing campaign, but discerning observers noticed that every HealthBridge presentation focused on future capabilities rather than current functionality. Then came the Healthcare Security Summit in Chicago, where both MedLink and HealthBridge were invited to participate in a panel discussion on blockchain applications in medical data. I arrived prepared with detailed security benchmarks from our live implementations. Vanessa arrived with glossy brochures and vague promises. The moderator, a respected cybersecurity expert, directed a pointed question at HealthBridge. Your marketing materials claim military-grade encryption and unhackable architecture, but independent security researchers have expressed concerns about your reliance on proprietary protocols rather than established standards. Can you address these concerns with specific technical details? Vanessa faltered visibly. HealthBridge employs a multi-layered security approach that adapts established protocols to meet healthcare's unique requirements. The specific implementation details are confidential, but we're confident our approach exceeds industry standards. Can you share any penetration testing results? Pressed the moderator. We're still in the final stages of security validation, Vanessa admitted reluctantly. When my turn came, I simply presented MedLink's third-party security audit results, complete with detailed penetration testing outcomes and our responsive improvements. The contrast couldn't have been clearer. MedLink had built real security architecture that withstood actual testing, while HealthBridge was still constructing a theoretical framework. After the panel, a senior technology officer from one of the nation's largest hospital systems approached me. We've been in discussions with Axelon about HealthBridge for months, he confided, but they keep delaying technical demonstrations. Your presentation today was refreshingly concrete. Would you be open to discussing potential implementation at our facilities? Similar conversations occurred throughout the day as healthcare executives who had been courted by Axelon's marketing machine began seeking substantive alternatives. By the end of the summit, MedLink had scheduled demos with 5 major healthcare systems that had previously been considering HealthBridge. 2 weeks later, the first public crack in HealthBridge's facade appeared. An industry blog published an anonymous interview with an Axelon engineer who had recently left the company. The headline was devastating. Inside HealthBridge, How Axelon's Healthcare Moonshot Became a Technical Quagmire. The article detailed the project's fundamental flaws: architecture designed by marketing requirements rather than technical realities, unrealistic deadlines that forced shortcuts, and executive interference that undermined engineering best practices. Most damaging was the revelation that patient data in HealthBridge's test environment had been exposed during an unauthorized access incident, a security breach that had been quietly addressed internally but never disclosed to potential partners. Within hours, the story was picked up by mainstream technology publications. Axelon's PR team issued immediate denials, but the damage was done. Healthcare partners, extraordinarily sensitive to data security concerns, began publicly distancing themselves from HealthBridge. Vanessa appeared on a technology podcast to defend the project, but her responses to specific technical questions were evasive and unconvincing. Industry analysts began questioning whether HealthBridge would ever launch as promised, or if Axelon would eventually write off the increasingly troubled initiative. I took no public position on HealthBridge's struggles, maintaining professional focus on MedLink's growth rather than our competitors' challenges. Privately, however, our team monitored the situation closely, recognizing that Axelon's stumbles created opportunities for us to establish MedLink as the trusted solution in the space. The real inflection point came 3 months later, when the KITE Healthcare Data Consortium, an influential industry standards organization, announced its certification program for patient-centered data platforms. MedLink was among the first platforms to receive certification, having met all technical and security requirements in the initial evaluation phase. HealthBridge, conspicuously, was not on the certification list. When questioned by industry analysts, Axelon issued a terse statement claiming they were in ongoing discussions with the consortium regarding certification criteria and would pursue certification when appropriate, corporate speak for having failed the evaluation. That same week, I received a surprising call from my father. In all the months since Vanessa had launched HealthBridge, he had maintained unwavering support for her position, dismissing MedLink's achievements as temporary luck against the inevitable corporate advantage. "Olivia," he began hesitantly, "I saw the news about MedLink's certification. That's quite an accomplishment." "Thank you," I replied, genuinely surprised by the acknowledgement. The team worked incredibly hard to meet all the technical requirements. There was an uncomfortable pause before he continued. "Your mother and I had dinner with Vanessa last night. She seemed distressed about the HealthBridge situation, said there might be significant changes coming." "What kind of changes?" asked, immediately alert. She wouldn't say specifically, just that Axelon's executive team was re-evaluating the project's leadership and direction. I thought you might want to know. It was the closest my father had come to, taking my side in the silent conflict between his daughters. The information itself was valuable, but his decision to share it with me represented a subtle but significant shift in family dynamics. 2 days later, the other shoe dropped. Axelon announced a strategic realignment of the HealthBridge initiative, including a 6-month development pause for technical reassessment and architecture optimization. Buried in the corporate jargon was the critical detail. Vanessa had been reassigned to an advisory role, with technical leadership transferred to Axelon's chief technology officer. She had been effectively demoted, removed from direct control of the project she had championed as her visionary contribution to healthcare innovation. The initiative she had built by appropriating my idea was collapsing under technical debt and security concerns, while MedLink continued its steady growth through methodical development and genuine user focus. That evening, as news of Axelon's announcement spread through industry channels, I received a text message from an unknown number. "HealthBridge is dead. They're just looking for a way to kill it without admitting failure. Thought you should know." Another insider at Axelon, perhaps the same one who had warned me months earlier about their development timeline. I put down my phone and gazed out my office window at the San Francisco skyline, feeling not triumph, but a complex mixture of vindication and sadness. Vanessa had betrayed my trust, stolen my concept, and attempted to use corporate resources to crush my startup. Now her professional reputation was damaged, while MedLink was flourishing. Yet I took no joy in her downfall. The sister who had once helped me with homework and taught me to navigate social situations was still somewhere beneath the corporate executive who had made a calculated decision to exploit family knowledge for professional gain. Her failure wasn't a victory for me, it was a tragedy for both of us, the culmination of a lifetime of unhealthy competition that had finally broken into open conflict. As MedLink continued its upward trajectory and HealthBridge spiraled into corporate limbo, I wondered if our relationship could ever recover from the wreckage of professional rivalry. I didn't know then that the real crisis, and potential reconciliation, was yet to come, when Vanessa would face the ultimate humiliation and be forced to make an impossible choice. MedLink's Series B funding round closed at $42 million, an extraordinary milestone that valued our company at nearly $200 million just 18 months after we'd rejected Axelon's insulting acquisition offer. The round was led by Health Venture Partners, one of the most respected investors in healthcare technology, with participation from 3 additional venture capital firms and the strategic investment arm of a major hospital system. The press coverage was extensive, with technology and business publications hailing MedLink as healthcare's next unicorn. and me as a visionary founder transforming medical data accessibility. Our platform now served over 200,000 patients across 47 healthcare facilities, with documented improvements in care coordination and patient outcomes. I should have been celebrating unreservedly, but the absence of family connection tempered my joy. My parents had been invited to the closing dinner but declined, citing a prior commitment. I later learned from my mother that they had attended a crisis management meeting at Vanessa's home that same evening. The morning after our funding announcement, the other shoe dropped. The Wall Street Journal published a devastating exposé on HealthBridge titled, "Anatomy of a Tech Failure: How Axelon Wasted $80 Million on a Healthcare Moonshot." The article detailed the project's troubled history, including multiple missed deadlines, security vulnerabilities, and executive conflicts. Most damagingly, it revealed that Axelon had begun quietly dismantling the HealthBridge team, reassigning engineers to other projects while maintaining public pretense that the initiative was merely paused for reassessment. The article made only passing reference to MedLink as a successful startup addressing similar market needs with a fraction of HealthBridge's resources. Even in this moment of Vanessa's professional humiliation, I was still the footnote to her headline. 3 days later, as the fallout from the journal article continued to reverberate through technology circles, I received an unexpected visitor at MedLink's offices. Our receptionist messaged me directly. "Your sister is here. No appointment. Says it's urgent." I found Vanessa waiting in our small lobby, a jarring sight against the backdrop of MedLink's modest but tasteful startup environment. She looked exhausted, the polished corporate facade cracked by stress and sleepless nights. "Can we talk privately?" she asked without preamble. I led her to my office, hyper-aware of the curious glances from my team. Many of them knew the backstory between us and recognized the architect of HealthBridge from industry events. Once the door closed behind us, Vanessa stood awkwardly in the center of the room, taking in the whiteboards covered with development, roadmaps, and the wall displaying testimonials from patients whose lives had been improved by MedLink. "Congratulations on your funding round," she said finally, her voice carefully neutral. "$42 million is impressive." "Thank you," I replied simply, waiting for her to reveal the purpose of this unexpected visit. She paced briefly before stopping at the window overlooking San Francisco Bay. "Axelon is officially canceling HealthBridge next week." The journal article forced their hand. They'll frame it as strategic realignment of healthcare initiatives, but everyone will know the truth. "I'm sorry," I said, and meant it despite everything. I understood the professional devastation she must be feeling. "Are you?" she asked sharply, turning to face me. "This is what you wanted, isn't it? Your little startup succeeding while my project crashes and burns? The perfect revenge story." "That's not," I began, but she cut me off. "Do you know what they're saying about me at Axelon? That I overreached. That I failed to execute a promising concept. My reputation is in tatters, Olivia. The golden child has finally fallen from grace." The raw pain in her voice was startling. For the first time, I glimpsed the true cost of her actions. Not just the professional consequences, but the damage to her self-image as the perpetually successful sister. "I didn't want this for you, Vanessa," I said quietly. "I just wanted to build MedLink without interference. You're the one who made it a competition." She laughed bitterly. "Everything has always been a competition between us. Mom and Dad made sure of that from the beginning, comparing our grades, our achievements, our potential. I was just better at playing their game. Until now," I observed, not unkindly. She nodded, a quick acknowledgement of the changed reality. "Until now." There was a long silence before she spoke again, her voice softer. "I need your help, Olivia, of all the things I had expected her to say, this wasn't one of them. My skepticism must have been obvious. Not for me, she clarified quickly. For the patients. HealthBridge may have been a failure, but we collected valuable data during our limited trials. Information that could help people if it were properly integrated into a functioning system. Like MedLink, I supplied. Like MedLink, she agreed reluctantly. I've convinced Axelon to consider donating the HealthBridge data to a suitable platform rather than simply archiving it when the project shuts down. It would be a positive PR move for them amid the cancellation announcement. And you're suggesting that platform should be MedLink? I'm suggesting it could be MedLink if you're willing to work with Axelon on the data integration. No strings attached, no attempt to influence your company's direction. Just a straightforward data transfer to ensure the information benefits patients rather than gathering digital dust in Axelon's archives. The proposal was tantalizing from a business perspective. HealthBridge may have failed as a product, but its data, gathered from prestigious medical institutions that had participated in its limited trials, would be valuable for enhancing MedLink's algorithms and expanding our knowledge base. But I couldn't help wondering if this was another of Vanessa's calculated moves. Why advocate for MedLink? There are other patient data platforms. She met my eyes directly. Because yours works. Because you built something real while I was building a house of cards. Because... She hesitated, vulnerability briefly replacing the corporate mask. Because I owe you this much at least. It was the closest thing to an apology I was likely to get. An acknowledgement that she had taken something from me and failed to deliver on its promise. Now she was offering a form of restitution, however inadequate compared to the original theft. I'll need to discuss this with my team, I said, carefully. There would be technical and legal considerations for any data integration of this scale. Of course, she nodded, reaching into her bag to produce a flash drive. This contains an overview of the data structure and preliminary integration specifications. Axelon's legal team has already reviewed potential transfer frameworks. Take your time to evaluate it properly. As she handed me the drive, our fingers briefly touched, the first physical contact between us in nearly 2 years. Something shifted in that moment, a hairline fracture in the wall of professional animosity that had separated us. For what it's worth, she said quietly, what you've built here is remarkable. A true innovation that's actually helping people. I should have seen that potential when you first shared it, instead of stealing it. The unspoken conclusion hung in the air between us. Thank you for coming, I said simply, neither accepting nor rejecting the implicit apology. At the door, she paused. Mom and Dad have invited us both to dinner next Sunday. I've already said yes. It would mean a lot to them if you came too. I'll think about it, I promised, non-committal. After she left, I stood at the window watching her cross the street to her waiting car, feeling the weight of an impending decision that would affect not just MedLink's future, but the possibility of healing wounds that went far deeper than business rivalry. The HealthBridge data would be valuable for MedLink. There was no question about that. But accepting it meant accepting a connection to Vanessa that I had been determined to sever. It meant acknowledging that her failure and my success didn't have to be mutually exclusive endpoints, but could instead become part of a more complex, collaborative resolution. As I turned back to my desk, my phone buzzed with an incoming call from our lead investor. Olivia, have you seen the news? Axelon is shutting down HealthBridge completely. Their stock is taking a hit, but more importantly, this removes your biggest potential competitor. We should discuss accelerating our expansion plans immediately. The endgame was approaching faster than I had anticipated. Decisions made in the coming days would determine not just MedLink's trajectory, but the shape of my relationship with Vanessa moving forward. The family failure had built a successful company against all odds, but the harder challenge remained. Deciding what success really meant beyond balance sheets and market position, the true test was about to begin. The day MedLink went public was surreal. Standing on the NASDAQ trading floor, surrounded by my team and investors, I watched our company symbol appear on the massive display as trading began. The initial public offering had been priced at $42 per share, valuing Medlink at just over $1.2 billion. By mid-morning, the stock had jumped to $57, making us officially a unicorn in startup parlance. Financial commentators called it the healthcare tech success story of the year. Industry analysts praised our patient-centered approach and proven results across hundreds of healthcare facilities. My inbox overflowed with congratulations from partners, customers, and former skeptics, now eager to claim early recognition of Medlink's potential. Amidst this professional triumph, my thoughts kept returning to the family dinner I had attended 3 months earlier, the first time all 4 of us had been together since Vanessa's health bridge project collapsed. The atmosphere had been tense initially, with my father struggling to reconcile his daughter's reversed fortunes. He had built his worldview around Vanessa as the family success story, and me as the well-meaning but impractical dreamer. Seeing me as a successful CEO while Vanessa navigated professional setback challenged the narrative he'd embraced for decades. Axelon has offered me a position leading their healthcare regulatory compliance division, Vanessa had announced over dessert, breaking an awkward silence. Smaller team, more focused scope, but still executive level. That's wonderful. Our mother had responded with genuine relief. You've always excelled at navigating complex requirements, and Medlink has integrated the health bridge data, I added, building on the positive moment. It's already improving our predictive algorithms for medication management. It's actually become an important part of our IPO story. Vanessa had nodded, a small but significant acknowledgement. I'm glad something meaningful survived from the project. As the evening progressed, an unspoken truce emerged. We weren't yet the close sisters we had been as children, but we were no longer active adversaries. The competitive dynamic remained, perhaps inevitably, but its destructive edge had been blunted by mutual recognition of each other's capabilities. Now, standing on the NASDAQ floor as Medlink's opening bell ceremony concluded, I spotted a familiar face in the small crowd of well-wishers, Vanessa, standing slightly apart but unmistakably present. Our eyes met across the trading floor, and she raised her hand in a small wave, her expression a complex mix of emotions I couldn't fully decipher from a distance. Later that evening, after the official celebrations had concluded, I received a text message. Congratulations. Truly deserved. Coffee tomorrow? We met at a quiet cafe near my hotel, both of us exhausted from the intensity of the previous day, but somehow more relaxed in each other's presence than we had been in years. So, Vanessa began, stirring her latte absently. How does it feel? To be a billionaire on paper? I laughed. Surreal. Overwhelming. Not quite real yet. Well, get used to it. From what I hear, Medlink is just getting started. The analysts are predicting significant growth now that you have public capital to expand internationally. That's the plan, I acknowledged. Europe next year, then Asia. The healthcare data challenges are universal, even if the systems differ. She nodded thoughtfully. You know, when I first saw your concept at that showcase, I recognized its potential immediately. What I failed to recognize was that you were the one who could actually bring it to life. That was my biggest mistake. Not just ethically, but strategically. The frank admission surprised me. Why do you think HealthBridge failed where Medlink succeeded? You had hundreds of engineers and virtually unlimited resources. She considered the question carefully. Corporate bureaucracy was part of it. Every decision required approval from multiple stakeholders with competing priorities. But honestly, we lacked the patient-centered vision that drove your development. You built Medlink to solve a real problem you deeply understood. We built HealthBridge to capture market share in an emerging space. The irony is that we ended up capturing the market share anyway, I observed. Because you focused on the mission, Not the market, she replied. A lesson I've taken to heart in my new role. A comfortable silence fell between us. Perhaps the first truly comfortable moment we'd shared as adults. When Vanessa spoke again, her voice was quieter, more reflective. Do you remember when we were kids, before the competition took over everything? How we used to build elaborate pillow forts in the living room and pretend they were high-tech command centers. I smiled at the memory. You were always the commander, and I was always the chief engineer. You were better at designing the structures, she acknowledged. I was just better at giving orders. Some things never change, I teased gently. She laughed, the sound surprisingly genuine. I deserved that. As our coffee stretched into a second hour, we cautiously navigated toward the heart of what had divided us. Not just the health bridge, betrayal, but the lifetime of comparison and competition that had preceded it. Mom and Dad really did a number on us, didn't they? Vanessa said finally. Always comparing, always positioning us against each other, instead of letting us be individuals, with different strengths. Dad more than Mom, I observed. She's actually been surprisingly supportive of MedLink, even when it meant acknowledging you had made a mistake with HealthBridge. Vanessa nodded slowly. He struggles with complexity. People are either successes or failures in his worldview, with nothing in between. It's why he clung so hard to the narrative of me as the achiever and you as the dreamer. The role reversal has been challenging for him. And for you, I added gently. She met my eyes directly. Yes, for me too, but also illuminating. I built my entire identity around being the successful one, the responsible one, the one who made the right choices. Watching you succeed by making choices I would have dismissed as impractical forced me to reconsider everything I thought I knew about success. I never wanted to replace you as the family success story, I said honestly. I just wanted to build something meaningful on my own terms. I know that now, she acknowledged. But for what it's worth, I'm proud of you, Olivia. Not just professionally, but personally. You stood your ground when everyone, including me, told you to give up. That kind of conviction is rare. The words I had unconsciously sought for decades landed with unexpected emotional weight. My sister, my brilliant, accomplished, intimidating older sister, was proud of me. Not grudgingly accepting of my success, not strategically acknowledging a competitor, but genuinely proud. Thank you, I said simply, knowing she would understand the depth behind those two words. As we prepared to leave, Vanessa hesitated briefly. Dad called this morning. He wants to have dinner to celebrate your IPO. Mom's already planning an elaborate meal. Are you coming? I asked. If you want me there, she replied carefully. I do, I said, surprising myself with how true it felt. It wouldn't be a family celebration without you. Walking back to my hotel afterward, I reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought me to this moment. 4 years ago, I had been the family failure, the perpetual disappointment whose ideas were dismissed before they could take root. Now MedLink was a publicly traded company, valued at over $1 billion, with technology that was literally saving lives every day. But the most meaningful transformation wasn't measured in stock prices or market capitalization. It was in the slow healing of family wounds that had seemed irreparable just months earlier. It was in the newfound respect from my sister, who had once been my fiercest critic and was now cautiously becoming my ally. The following week, a package arrived at my office. Inside was a framed article from the Wall Street Journal's coverage of MedLink's IPO. The headline read, Healthcare Innovator Transforms Patient Data Management. MedLink CEO Redefines Success. A handwritten note accompanied. Not bad for the family failure. Proud of you, little sister. I hung it prominently on my office wall, not as a trophy of victory in our sibling rivalry, but as a reminder that true success isn't about proving others wrong. It's about staying true to your vision even when those closest to you can't. Yet see its value. The family failure label that had once defined me had become the foundation of my greatest strength, the willingness to pursue what I believed in despite universal skepticism. In failing to meet others' expectations, I had found the freedom to exceed my own. As MedLink continued to grow and transform healthcare data management globally, I carried this understanding forward, not just as a business principle, but as a personal philosophy. The most meaningful innovations often begin as dismissed dreams, and the most profound success stories often begin with someone having the courage to fail differently than expected. That's the story I now share with aspiring entrepreneurs who ask how MedLink became so successful against overwhelming odds. It's not just about technology or timing or talent, though all played their part. It's about the power of being underestimated and the quiet determiner. Tie in to prove, one line of code at a time, that the family failure might just change the world after all. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.